like these parts that are similar but not the same, shops are just like that. They may look similar, they're not the same. You will see that there are people out here ready to defend the wrong way to fix a car.
Right.
And I will defend for the rest of my life the right way to fix a car. So to comment that if you get that the automakers don't make radiators and AC condensers, another company does, and if you get an aftermarket one from that company, it's the same thing.
Right.
I'm here to tell you it is not the same thing. And we'll talk about it in this article from Repair Driven News back in 2019.
Hello everybody and welcome back to another episode of the Airing of Grievances. I'm Eric Raymer, this is Robert Grieve, and as always, it is a pleasure to have you on board. Now, if this is one of your first times viewing this channel, we want to say a special welcome. If you see something you like, we'd love it if you would click the subscribe button. Don't forget to click the notification bell as well. That'll tell you that every Saturday morning at 9:30 a.m. another episode of the Airing of Grievances is about to drop. And during that first episode, Rob and I will actually chat with you live. So
it's a lot of fun.
It is, right?
Join in.
If you're watching it live with us at that 9:30 a.m. in the Mountain Standard Time, we'd be happy to chat with you and answer any questions. We have a lot of fun during that. And then second of all, if you're one of our family, one of our regulars, hey, thanks again. We appreciate it.
Appreciate you so much.
For everyone, if you haven't done it yet, hammer that subscribe button, okay? Do that, and then give us a like. Give us a like, a thumbs up. That tells.
I give you a thumbs up. Give me one back.
There you go. That tells YouTube to share this with more people. All right, Rob, we've had some pretty decent. Happy
Saturday, my dear friends. Happy Saturday. Thank you so much.
We've had some decent success over the last 3-4 weeks with our videos, and by decent success, it just means more people are viewing them. If you haven't, you can go back to click the videos tab and check out some of the videos that we are doing. But Rob, with success comes commentary.
Yes, and we welcome it. We struck a chord last week, and I loved it. The comments are amazing.
Yeah.
And I think, I just thought it was enough that we should just revisit the subject a little bit.
Absolutely.
And because I am passionate about this subject.
Here's a link to the video. I'll also put it in the description box. Don't click it just yet, but it's there if you want to come check it out. And so, what chord was struck, and how should we revisit?
Well, there was a lot of conversation about the aftermarket parts that we were talking about last week.
Not everybody agrees with our position on aftermarket parts, which is basically we don't use them.
No.
We won't use them.
Won't use them.
And we get some feedback.
Yeah.
On that.
Yeah. Like, who cares, aftermarket or OEM, as long as they fit? Well, that's exactly what they're meant to do. Mm-hmm. They're meant to fit and fool somebody, because they're not the same.
Right.
And when it comes, to me, all these parts that the OE makes for their specific vehicles, they've all been tested. And
OE stands for the original equipment manufacturer.
Yeah. It's important. They put a lot of effort into the parts.
Not just effort.
And, they're not the same. The copycat parts are not the same. They're just not the same. And, a comment was made about radiators and AC condensers. You might as well throw power steering coolers in there, because those are all thermal components.
Sure.
They're meant to dissipate heat.
Right.
We don't want heat.
Heat is bad. Heat's the killer of all things mechanical.
So when you're talking about You may be talking about a fender being an aftermarket or a hood being aftermarket, and it doesn't matter if it's aftermarket or original equipment. It matters to me because all those parts have been tested,
Right.
and the manufacturer stands behind them.
The OE parts have been tested.
Yeah, the OE parts have been tested, and they've been tested as a unit.
Right.
These aftermarket copycat parts have not.
Yeah, you don't see people buying a vehicle to put an aftermarket part on to run it down the alley and get it crashed.
Yeah. So, especially when it comes to, now I want to talk about mechanical parts. And mechanical parts are not only ones that move. All right, your AC condenser and your radiator and your power steering cooler, these thermal parts meant to dissipate heat. They are designed very specifically.
Sure.
For each vehicle, each engine type, where it fits in the body, how is it going to get cooled itself in order to dissipate the heat.
Right.
All these things, and does it need to be an inch wide, or can a half inch work, or because manufacturers are also worried about weight and all the rest of that stuff.
Sure.
So I asked Eric to pull up an article that I thought I kind of remembered from Repair Driven News in 2019.
Yeah, I don't know how you do that with your memory, but I found it on the interwebs.
But somebody in the comments section from last week actually mentioned Denso. So Denso is a manufacturer of aftermarket and OE parts, AC condensers, radiators, many different things.
Okay.
Denso makes many different things, and they make it for a variety of manufacturers of vehicles.
Okay.
So to comment that if you get that the automakers don't make radiators and AC condensers, another company does, and if you get an aftermarket one from that company, it's the same thing.
Right.
I'm here to tell you it is not the same thing. And we'll talk about it in this article from Repair Driven News back in 2019.
Okay.
And this conversation that took place, I was actually there. That was at a CIC convention, Collision Industry Conference.
Yep.
I was actually there for this conversation, and it was eye-opening.
Yeah.
And so we have on the stage people from Denso,
Yep.
the maker of not only aftermarket AC condensers and radiators and so on and so forth, but they also make them for the OE,
Okay.
for the original equipment manufacturers.
Yep.
So if you open up your hood, you may see your radiator and it might have a Denso sticker on it. It's made for that car from Denso.
The
For
OE
the
hires
OE.
that company to make this proprietary
Yes.
thing.
So on the stage is not only Denso, a representative from Denso, but a representative from Toyota.
Oh.
And so I just want to talk about a few of these, hit some of the highlights. First off, the title here, Denso, OEM aftermarket parts from the same manufacturer, not necessarily identical. So here's the guy from Denso.
The guy that our commenter mentioned specifically.
Yeah.
All the same.
Yeah.
Got it.
All the same. So, yes, I'm here from Denso. We make OEM parts and we make aftermarket parts, and they're not the same.
Interesting.
So, it's sometimes asserted that OEM and aftermarket parts made by the same manufacturer are identical. This was made in the comments.
Yes.
From last week's video.
Right.
But Tier 1 supplier producing both confirmed last month differences might exist.
Differences might exist. Oh,
Yeah, that was a nice way of saying they're not the same.
Very interesting.
Yes. Asked if Denso ever sold aftermarket parts that exceeded manufacturer specifications, Williams, that's the gentleman from Denso, called it extremely rare. So we make aftermarket, we make the OEM parts, we make aftermarket parts. The aftermarket parts may not be the same as OE parts. So here's some of the difference. Eric Mendoza from that's the gentleman from Toyota, said that Toyota, as a Denso consumer, would ask the Tier 1 supplier, Denso, to live up to certain standards.
Mm-hmm.
These could include performing quality control checks on certain amount of parts at certain frequency. So Toyota or Hyundai, whatever manufacturer it is, goes to Denso and says, we need a radiator for this engine,
Yeah.
this structure of the car. It'll have these bumpers and grills. It'll get this amount of airflow. We need it to cool this thing. So Denso and that manufacturer work together on a very specific part for that vehicle, taking all of those standards into effect. Okay?
Yep.
How much room, how much airflow is this part going to get? How big is the engine? How much heat is it going to produce?
Yep.
How big is does the condenser need to be for the air conditioning? And they come up with a part for that vehicle.
Right.
And they license it.
Sure.
Denso can no longer sell that to anybody else but through the manufacturer channels.
They detail that very clearly in this article.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So just to go through a couple of the things, Williams, the gentleman from Denso, agreed. He said OEM criteria for factory parts, including testing, form, fit, and function, and consistency over the life of the contract. So the contract is how long they're going to be making these radiators, AC condensers, and so on and so forth. That's an important thing to the manufacturer.
Right.
The manufacturer audits Denso.
Sure they do.
Not just when they're making the car, but long after. Because if you get in a wreck, you need one, and if it's 10 years later and you're buying a Toyota part made by Denso,
got to be the same part.
It's got to be the same. So, here we go. Even 15 years later, a part must still meet material and performance specifications, Williams said. Any deviations must be reported to the OEM for approval. So let's just say, we're 10 years into making this radiator for an RX, a Lexus RX.
Yeah.
It has to be the same. If something changes in manufacturing, say they can't get enough aluminum or something and they change the thickness, or they can't do that. The contract says this is what we're buying, this is what you're making.
Right.
If there's any deviations, the manufacturer, the OEM, needs to be involved in it. It's not quite the same for the OEM.
For the
aftermarket.
Right.
So when Denso distributes its own aftermarket parts through the retail channel, it doesn't meet the same criteria as what it builds for the OEM.
Sounds like it's different.
And in the aftermarket case, the parts that they make for the aftermarket, Denso itself determines the consistency, the quality, and the form, fit, and function targets for the part, not the manufacturer of the car.
Right.
So basically what they're saying is they're not supervised. They can make whatever they want to make. So when talking about these aftermarket parts that they make, even though they made the OEM do very specific specifications,
Yep.
the aftermarket one not so much. Denso will analyze the shape, form, fit, and function of a part and wonder how to back it off to meet a wider market. So in other words,
that's an interesting thing.
Yeah.
They're going to back it off to meet a wider market. Tell me about that.
They want it to fit more cars. So the part that Denso makes,
Yep.
that sells the aftermarket part, they want to put it on the shelf and have it fit a lot of cars, not just one car with one engine, specification.
So this might have multiple fitting holes to accommodate multiple different vehicles, bolts where they bolted on, and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Well, the gentleman from Denso gave a hypothetical example of an OEM platform with a 41 millimeter AC condenser.
Okay.
Okay. Denso might decide to make a 40 millimeter aftermarket condenser, able to fit vehicles that come with from 39 millimeters to 42 millimeters. And so they're looking to get about 85% of the OE.
About 85% of the OE's capacity
Yeah.
to cool.
Yeah. So he says right here, typically targets 85 to 90% of the OEM specs in their aftermarket parts. So not 100% of their specs.
Sounds like...
But they couldn't put it in at 100% of the specs because that would be a licensing problem.
Right.
So let's see what else might be interesting here. One contractual barrier might arise when an OEM like Toyota pays Denso to develop a completely new part, one never done before, Williams said. So now we're talking about Denso and we're talking about Toyota.
Right.
The automaker owns the intellectual property.
Sure.
Not Denso.
That's right. We thought of it. We
Yeah.
created it.
Which means it'd
Designed
be an
it.
infringement for Denso to sell that part on its own. It can't. So the part you buy from the aftermarket is not the same as the part that you buy from the manufacturer.
By its very definition.
So, and this is really a very interesting article, but when it comes to aftermarket parts, they are re-engineered. They look at the part the manufacturer spent all this time and energy making specific for this vehicle,
Yeah.
and they try to re-engineer it. But does it work in concert with everything else the way the manufacturer has designed it? Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't.
I'm the voice of every man. I'm the target market for this video, and to me it seems fairly clear, and correct me if I'm wrong, that if let's call it a radiator.
Mm-hmm.
A radiator is designed with a bunch of fins, I think is what it's called.
Yep.
To
Rows of them.
rows and rows, right?
Mm-hmm.
To cool at the operating temperature of the engine, to keep it at a certain operating temperature. And it seems to me if you backed that off by 10 or 15%, that the engine would be running 10 or 15% hotter than it should be for optimal performance.
Maybe around town it's not a big deal unless you're in traffic, and then it may become a great big deal, or maybe you're on a long road trip going through Arizona where, oh wait.
This could be a deal breaker.
Yeah.
Or an engine breaker.
Yeah.
And so, yeah. Now you sent me a picture.
Yeah. Well, let's take a look at this one comment here.
Yeah.
The latest test comparison I did with OEM versus aftermarket condensers yielded a not so shocking results. The certified condenser, or the aftermarket,
Yeah.
which was the preferred part by the insurer, was lacking one cooling vane and 24 rows of fins per vane. Was a total of 1,500 VINs deficient from the OE. I mean, this is a guy that got down and dirty and
Counted.
counted. So why don't we throw that picture up, because I've done something similar. You'll notice that let's do it this way. I play a couple of video games on my iPad, and then you get commercials that pop up.
Yep.
One of them is for a game that it shows you two pictures and it says, see if you can find the differences. So why don't we see if we can find the differences? Because here we have...
You've made it a little easy for us here.
Yeah, here we have a factory AC condenser and an aftermarket made by the same company. And I went in and counted the rows, and yes, the rows are different, but there's other differences. And if you just had them side by side, you probably wouldn't notice the differences.
Right.
But when you want to play this game, you're really focusing on, all these little things. Over here, the aftermarket has a round tube.
Yep.
And which looks significantly bigger than the square one that's on the OEM.
Yep.
Which that kind of makes a difference, I would think.
Sure.
And then there's a tank on the side. There's just one difference right after the next, but just in the width alone, the factory one is 23.25 inches, and the aftermarket is 22.75.
It's a half
Is
inch
it a
difference.
big enough difference to make a difference? I don't know, but I'm not going to make that decision for you.
Right.
My job is to put it back to pre-loss condition, the way it was before the accident.
Yep.
And that means this part fails because it is not like, kind, and quality.
Right.
It is similar.
And we understand that our commenter feels okay
Yeah,
with good enough.
yeah.
We get that.
Yeah, maybe it's going to work, maybe it won't. Maybe it'll work some of the time, not all the time. I don't know. I'm not making that decision for you. My job is to put it back to pre-loss condition.
Right.
The way it was before you had the accident.
We have a tagline here at Nylund's that we like to use because it sums up how we feel about repairs. And the tagline simply goes like this: if it isn't perfect,
It isn't leaving. And, this is all important stuff to me. Like these parts that are similar but not the same, shops are just like that. They may look similar, they're not the same. And you may think you're going to a big box, big brand.
it may even be your insurance's preferred
Yeah.
list
Yeah.
brand.
And they'll be required to put these parts on your vehicle and not even tell you. Or if you
The
did,
aftermarket parts.
If you did ask, they'll be fine. And by reading some of these comments from our last post, you will see that there are people out here ready to defend the wrong way to fix a car.
Right.
And I will defend for the rest of my life the right way to fix a car.
Which is why we appreciate your time, your expertise, and why your customer base is so flippin' loyal, because they know there's only one way to fix a car, and it's the correct way, the way
Yeah.
the original equipment manufacturer
Designed
made
it. They spent a lot of time and effort into that. I just wanted to read one other comment here.
Yeah.
And give a big shout out to William. And this is on last week's thing. Hey guys, excellent and informative episode. I work at Gerber in Florida. Remember we talked about Gerber in the last video.
Yeah.
And yes, I've been using aftermarket parts my whole estimating career. It's what they're trained to do.
That's what you got to do.
Thank you for opening my eyes to the issues that can occur when using these parts. Decertified aftermarket parts is a mind-blowing news, and I'll do my research and combat the pressure from insurance companies' mindset of cost-effective parts.
William,
You know what? Thank you so much. You made my day. You made my week.
Yeah.
And
you're our why.
yeah,
This is the very same conversation.
I feel like I made a difference for a minute. And
There you go.
You know what? I appreciate you so very, very much for making that comment.
Yep.
And taking the time to be brutally honest.
Yep.
These parts are not, they're not the same, and you as a consumer do not deserve them. You deserve to be put back and made whole.
There you go.
So that's what I got for today.
Brother, happy Saturday to you.
You, my
Happy
dear friends, thank you so much. Don't forget to hit that like button. I'd appreciate it.